Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Thursday, July 11th. Today is day 279 since October 7th. Today, in my weekly briefing, I was summarizing some of the horrible, horrific things that have happened in this past week. And I was going through numbers and updates and schools destroyed and children killed. And I was so overcome that some days I think, oh, we're making progress, less people are dying. And then other days, and today was one of those days where I just felt so overwhelmed by death, by the realities, by the fact that we live so far away, physically, but also just our daily realities. I turn on the light and there's light. I open, I turn on the faucet and I have water. That our daily realities are so far removed from the reality of people who are suffering in Gaza, hostages who need to be returned home, from people who are being held unjustly in Israeli prisons. And it was just determined Layan Nasser, who's the young Palestinian woman who was arrested, held on administrative detention, no charges brought forward, no trial. She's been in Israeli jail now for 4 months. She had a hearing today. It did not go well. And she is still being held under administrative detention. That's just one example. And that doesn't include bombs being dropped daily, bombs that in large part that we are paying for, that are being made here in the United States, that are being used, that are falling on civilians, that are killing civilians, men, women, and children. One of my spiritual disciplines is to try to keep my eyes open, to watch the video. There was a video posted this week that Al Jazeera had of a young boy who was at the site of that football match, soccer. The latest evacuation order had come a day after an Israeli air attack on Al Awada school, where 30 people were killed, 53 others were wounded. Most of them were women and children. And Palestinian medics were there, and there was this video. And I make myself watch those things. And friends, please do not close your eyes. Watch on social media. Don't ignore the atrocities. Early on in October, I prayed that God would break my heart for the things that break the heart of God. And that if my heart was not big enough, that God would expand my heart. And here we are, approaching 300 days later. Might our hearts continue to be broken until we can bring an end to these atrocities? News from the last 24 hours. I wanted to talk a bit about how aid is delivered in Gaza. Reuters put this report out. This was actually posted on the 4th of July. But it's about how feeding in Gaza is happening. And the article is about traders running gauntlets of bullets, bombs, and bribes. And it talks about how a trader for every single shipment has to pay more and more money because costs are becoming sky high. Every truck costs about $14,000. There are more and more middlemen. Each truck costs between $1,000 and $4,000 more than since when the war began. It's barely worth my while, he says, but I need food. My neighbors need food, and the whole of Gaza needs food. There's another man in the article who says he doesn't like it, but he has to hike up prices as much as 10 times or more the normal value just to be able to break even. Drivers in Israel have had to raise their rates threefold, if not more. Protesters are blocking trucks. Cargo has to wait for days at departure points like the Kerem Shalom crossing or for Israeli inspections. And then once in Gaza, people have to pay off local criminal gangs or hire armed men to stay on top of cargo to ward off looters. And it's important to note, this is not Hamas. This is not, militant groups that are armed. This is local gangs, and the cost to ward off these looters, many of whom are just really, really hungry people, is about $200 to $800. For every truck, it's about 3 to 5 people that have to be hired. There are no private sector goods that make it to North Gaza, where hunger is the most acute. The Israeli military has closed off that area from deliveries. The only food available there is aid, which is also very limited. Today, also, The Guardian just broke a story that was written by Chris McReal The title is Israeli Weapons Are Packed with Shrapnel, Causing Devastating Injuries to Children in Gaza, according to doctors. Surgeons who have worked in European and Al-Aqsa hospitals in Gaza describe extensive wounds that have caused fragmentation because of shrapnel, which is designed to maximize injuries. It says Israeli-made weapons designed to spray high levels of shrapnel are causing horrific injuries to civilians in Gaza and disproportionately harming children, foreign surgeons who work in the territory in recent months have reported. Doctors have said many of the deaths, amputations, life-changing wounds to children they have treated have come from the firing of missiles and shells in areas that are crowded with civilians, packed with additional metal designed to fragment into tiny pieces of shrapnel. Volunteer doctors at 2 hospitals have said the majority of their operations were on children hit by these small pieces that leave barely discernible entry wounds, but they create extensive internal damage. Amnesty International has said these weapons appear designed to maximize casualties. In other issues, the Washington Post issued a worldwide alert today saying that the Israeli military admitted severe mistakes in defending the border kibbutz in the first probe of the October 7th findings. We knew that would be released today. This was the result of the IDF investigation on the kibbutz Be'eri during the Hamas attacks on the 7th, where as many as 1,200 people might have been killed that day. Some army units waited outside as the massacre unfolded, according to the report. The IDF spokesperson Hagari apologized to residents of the kibbutz Be'eri. This is from an Israeli news source that said the IDF was not there. We failed to protect the kibbutz. The military probe, this was in response to that military probe. In kibbutz Be'eri, 101 kibbutz residents were murdered. 32 people were taken hostage. 11 still remain captive in Gaza. It's not known if they are dead or alive. The IDF estimated that 340 members of Hamas invaded that particular kibbutz. The IDF report stated that the army was not prepared for a scenario of mass penetration into Israel, like what happened on the 7th, that included multiple points of entry through which thousands of terrorists entered and dozens of fronts were attacked. Kibbutz residents in a statement demanded the establishment of a state commission of inquiry that would leave no stone unturned, would examine the conduct of all parties involved, and would provide definitive answers. In terms of ceasefire hostage negotiations, there's no major news in that regard. The group has left Doha and returned to Israel. They're having the Israeli team return to Israel. Others have returned to their respective areas. But there is said to be the next round of conversations in Cairo. Hamas has claimed in a statement that Israel continues to stall to win time. A senior Israeli official told Haaretz that the estimate was that the Israeli team can reach a deal with Hamas based on Netanyahu's red lines, which I've been sharing throughout the week. There's a list of proposals and ideas that under certain conditions could placate both sides. Another foreign source said that both sides know the cost of the deal. As soon as they decide they are ready to complete the deal for this price, it will be executed within days. The U.S. has been cautiously optimistic about the ceasefire talks, according to John Kirby at the White House and CNN. Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, said today that many details still have to be hammered out for a deal to be reached. Israel and Hamas, this is significant. While a deal has not yet been reached, and that's a precursor, Israel and Hamas have signaled that they have accepted an interim governance plan that would begin with phase 2. This is that 3-part phase of Biden's proposed plan. In phase 2, neither Hamas nor Israel would rule Gaza. Security would be provided by a force trained by the U.S. and backed by moderate Arab allies, that would be most likely Jordan and Egypt, drawn from a core group of about 2,500 supporters of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, who've already been vetted by Israel. Hamas has told mediators that it is prepared to relinquish authority in an interim governance arrangement, according to U.S. officials. Family members of hostages are halfway through that march that we've been talking about. They are set to arrive at the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem. They are calling on Netanyahu to secure a hostage release deal. U.S. aid Samantha Power said that the U.S. will provide an additional $100 million in humanitarian aid for Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. She's in Israel and holding meetings with UN and NGO partners to discuss security concerns affecting humanitarian aid workers and aid distribution, the lawlessness that we've been talking about, and the ongoing conflict. The spokesperson for Palestinian Civil Defense has said that 85% of the buildings in Gaza's city, Shujaiya neighborhood, are no longer suitable for living, and that there are thousands of bodies underneath the rubble that are contributing to the spread of diseases and infections among residents and displaced people. The death toll in Gaza, as of the recent reports, is 38,345 people, and those wounded is 88,295. In terms of the ongoing escalations between Hezbollah and Israel, another Israeli man was critically wounded in a Hezbollah drone strike. The IDF said that it struck Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, and Israel's chief military prosecutor said that hundreds of combat incidents are being examined related. Oh, that's a separate issue. So that's it about Hezbollah and Israel. In a separate issue, Israel's chief prosecutor said that hundreds of combat incidents are being examined related to harassment or suspicion of violence against detainees from Gaza. We were talking about this. The capability to investigate and prosecute where necessary is one of the things that distinguishes us from our enemies. I would love to think that that is true. Hours before, Israel's High Court of Justice was set to hear petitions against the controversial Sde Taman detention facility. The state published amendments to the law on the conditions at that facility and the rights of detainees, including shortening the time detainees could be prevented from accessing a lawyer. That issue continues to be problematic. In the West Bank, the U.S. issued sanctions against 3 Israeli individuals and 5 entities that accuses them of undermining stability in the West Bank, most notably the Lahava Jewish supremacist organization, led by an already sanctioned gentleman named Gopstein, a close advisor to the far-right minister Ben-Gvir, and members of Zvav 9, a right-wing group that disrupts aid convoys to Gaza. G7 foreign ministers joined the UN and the EU in condemning Israel's decision to legalize 5 outposts in the West Bank. And the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen urged Israel to maintain economic stability in the West Bank by consistently transferring the revenues it collects on behalf of the Palestinian Authority and ensuring uninterrupted banking relationships between Israeli and Palestinian banks. Finally, the Red Crescent Society in Palestine reported that a 17-year-old Palestinian was killed by Israeli forces in the village of Tubas. That is the update for the day. We will continue to pray and to work towards peace. Amen.